So I would like to focus on the body, inherited conditions. So gene expressing, a certain condition at time of birth. And in particular, I'd like to focus on sickle cell anemia. Other than surgery, bone marrow transplant, how can I be receptive to that well-being that you just spoke about without surgery?
The reason that we talk on and on and on as we do about at least trying to get your thoughts around what unconditional alignment feels like is so that when a condition that feels so threatening and feels so big and so impossible shows itself to you, at least you have some basis of stability. But when you start with something that causes you to be unstable, before you accomplish that stability, usually there isn't anything that we can say that you can hear that will make that difference. So we can continue to tell you that if this life experience and all that it causes you to put into your vortex can cause you to identify a desire that without exception, that desire can come to full manifestation. But you have to find a way to keep the desire alive under the experience of conditions. The thing about humans, we love you so much, is that you let the establishment, you let the status quo, you let the powers that be, you let the experts in the field, you let those who you think are wiser than you make proclamations about things that have to do with you. And then you modify your expectation to match their expectation, even though your desire is in a much more productive place than their desire would ever be. Have you ever noticed the difference between someone who really wants something and someone who sort of wants something? There is no comparison in the ability that they have to focus or in the willingness that they find to focus. And so we would like to take you back through time, just really briefly, in this very brief statement, and say to you, there have been so many things that have been said to be impossible by those proclaimers of the status quo, by those proclaimers of what is in the past. And we think that it is time for a large enough segment of the population to take that leap of faith, which is what an unconditional approach to this is, rather than having to have generations die off and new generations be born in order for new expectation to come about. We really want to say, in the most loving of ways, what is it with you people? We really want to say, can't there be a different way? Does someone have to show it to you before you can believe it? Do you believe that you have the ability to create something that has not been created before?
I do believe that, and I have a great desire to do that. It feels like I need some guidance, though.
Well, here's the guidance.
Yeah.
Stop talking about the label. Your whole presentation to us here, and we understand, was in the locking yourself in to the unchangeable things. And we know why that is too. In other words, it is not easy to have something. That is the reason that so many things do not change for so many, is because they have their nearly undivided attention on what is. And when your nearly undivided attention is on what is going to continue to propagate. What is. Hear this, you're really going to like this. It is going to take a while though. What is, to the point that you pass it on from generation to generation. How about that? So embedded in my being, in the very cells of my being, that I am passing it on, this huge expectation, even, hear this, a cellular expectation. I've trained my cells into an expectation as happened before me and before me and before me and before me. And we say, isn't it time for somebody to train their cells differently?
Yes. Now, can you help me with training differently? Is it just a belief? Is it appreciation, journaling?
When you say just a belief, we want to say a belief is a thought you continue to think. So yes, it is just a belief. It's a belief you continue to think. But you can't think that thought and this thought without this thought messing up this thought. You have to think that thought steady enough and long enough and sure enough. And that's why we're saying, think that thought about other things that are easier to think that thought about. If you will think the thought about things that are easy to think that thought about until you understand the receptive mode and how easy the receptive mode is to accomplish, then from the receptive mode, you can go to the beach and play with the kids. You see what we're getting at?
Yes.
But in this situation, and almost everyone does the same thing, in this situation, Abraham, take me to the beach and give me something to really be fun about, and then I'll feel better. And we say, it's got to be the other way around, it's got to be the other way around. And that's why we start with the laws of the universe as we know them to be. That's why we remind you that no one came here in any accidental form. That's why we remind you that when you make your transition into non-physical, as you've done again and again and again and again and again, it's a sort of clearinghouse process where you leave behind all doubt and fear and all unwanted things, and you become this pure positive energy. And it's from that vantage point that you make the decisions about coming back and everything that you're coming into. The timing of your birth, the placement of your birth, the who and the what and the where and the why of your birth, all of that is all known by you and intended by you, and there is never anything accidental that happens. And in every single case, you come into this physical time-space reality, into this magnificent body with source energy, knowing that in this time-space reality that you are going to give birth to things that maybe no one's given birth to before, or that you are going to give birth to things, but you are going to understand something differently, because you all, those of you who are here in this room, understand something that almost nobody on the planet yet to this point understands, and that is the very desires that come to you are coming from source, in understanding of the readiness that you are to receive your own intentions that you've put into your vortex. Some of those things you put there before you even came into this physical body. Ooh, do you accept that?
I do accept that.
So what if you said, I'll go forth and I'll have an experience unlike anything that anyone has ever had before? What if I change something that is said to be unchangeable? What if I do that? What if I do that? And we would like to say to every one of you about everything that you want that isn't yet in your experience. We're talking to you too about those things. It doesn't matter. She has maybe a really good excuse because it is something that someone has convinced her is unchangeable. But you all have convinced yourself that things are unchangeable. Otherwise, a whole lot of things would have changed by now. So you all have this sort of human sickness that goes like this. What is king in my world. It's so king that I feel about it, and I think about it, and I talk about it, and I join groups about it, and I process it, and I talk about it, and I process it, and I think about it, and I worry about it, and I work on it, and I work on it, and I set goals about it, and we say, yeah, and you keep propagating the very thing that you don't mean to, because you've got your attention on something that is in a vibrational frequency that is disallowing you from connecting into the source energy that you know. So here's the thing. You got to want to hook up, not for the ulterior motive of fixing something that's broken. And that's the thing about the unconditioned that will set you free. Because even though many of you have been with us several times, some of you are here for the first time, but many of you have been listening along for years and years and years, haven't you? And even though you've been listening to us for a long time, still, there are things in your now that you would like to be different than they are, that just stubbornly will not change because we love you so much. Because you still believe that this is a place where you come to learn the process that will make that different. And as long as you've come to apply a process to make that different, that can't change. That can't be different. That can't be different. That can't be different. That can't be different. That is unchangeable. That cannot be different. That unwanted thing cannot be different. It cannot be different. It cannot change. That cannot change. It cannot change. It cannot change. Why can it not change? Because you're looking at it. You're looking at it. And every time you look at it, you practice the vibration of it. So your desire gets stronger and stronger, but that gets in the way. That thing that you want to be different cannot change as long as you're looking at that. Doesn't that just twist your human brains into a knot? It does. We know that it does because you've been trained to believe that you just find a problem and you solve it, and that you never give up. You never give up, that you just wrestle it to the ground and you just kill it. You make a war against it. There's a war against it. There's a war against that, and a war against that, and a war against that, and a war against that. And they're all getting bigger because that can't change. That can't change. That can't change. It can't change. You can't change something that you believe is. So what has to be different is you have to feel different, which means you've got to take your attention off of that, which is causing that feeling. And when you take your feeling off of that, which changes that feeling, then that is left without nourishment for a while. It's left without nourishment. Do you know that if from one generation to the next, people would pretend they had a cure? Just pretend that they have a cure. From one generation to the next, they would stop the nourishment of the disease. It's attention to it that nourishes it. It's attention to the thought that nourishes it. So what you got to decide is, what do you want to broadcast about, and what do you want to broadcast about? Do you feel the difference? What do you want to broadcast about, and what do you want to broadcast about? There's no difference. That was a trick. But what do you want to broadcast about? What do you want to nourish? What do you want to nurture? That might be fun for you as you're playing with each other. Don't say it out loud because your friends won't like you. But as you're playing together over dinner, or as you're having different experiences together, and you're listening to conversations, especially to your own broadcasting, you might want to say to yourself, am I really wanting to nurture that? Am I wanting to nurture that? Am I wanting to keep that alive for this generation? Am I wanting to keep that alive for the next decade of my experience? How many decades have you kept some of that stuff alive? How many decades have you been nurturing things that you don't want to nurture? And how many people have you gone to and said, could you please remove this from my experience? You ever had anybody chop something off of you and it just comes right back?
So does that mean ignoring the lab work, ignoring, the physical aspects of keeping track of where you are?
Well, yes, it does mean ignore it, which means don't focus on it. But the thing about that is, we've never seen any of you who were able to not think about something because you're thinking about it while you're trying not to think about it. And so you got to think about something else more. That's the thing. You have to replace those worrisome thoughts by broadcasting thoughts that you don't feel so worrisome about. You see, it's easy for us to see it for you because we know about your vortex, and we know what's in the process of becoming, and we know how what's in your vortex becomes. So it's interesting to us to watch you get this far to a desire and maybe even nurture the desire a little bit, and then look at what is, and because what is isn't this yet, it would be like mixing all of the ingredients for your cake and putting it in the oven, and the oven has a glass door and it has a light on it, and you're just standing there looking at it. And then when it barely begins to cook, you take it out and you say, I think I'll just eat this cake in the squat before it's even had a chance to be what it's supposed to be. I'm just going to eat it in its squatted position. And then you complain to others, this cake is not even good. I cannot make a good cake, and I don't understand it. I followed all the directions, I put everything in it, and I put it in the oven, and I just changed that one little thing, but the cake just isn't good. And you can feel how silly that is, because you want to give it time to become, and yet you all often, even though the desire is there, and even though momentary belief is there, you want to rush over here and eat it before it's ready. And we would like you all to go home and make a cake and watch it cook all the way up. Watch it from the beginning to the end. Watch it. Watch how it slowly comes into being. Watch how it becomes. And don't take it out till it's done. And do that with your own desires. Don't stop focusing upon the becoming until it has become the way you want it to. Don't ask anything to operate outside of the laws of the universe. Nothing is going to do that, you see. And you can be or do or have anything inside the laws of the universe. You just have to understand how it feels and then hold steady to it.